Hello again, YouTube. It's Lovell, and I'm going to do a slight variation on an explains why video. And in this one, it's going to be Lovell explains what the difference between a democracy and a republic are. And there is a difference. A democracy is, effectively speaking, mob rule. Yeah, it's the proverbial question of if two wolves and a sheep are voting on what's for dinner. Guess what? The sheep isn't going to make it past dinner, is he? Well, that is a democracy, plain and simple. If 51% of the country votes to take the shirt off your back because they don't like your shirt, well, guess what? You're losing your shirt. A republic, which is what we've had from the very beginning, has rules designed to protect the minority, to protect the rights of the one, regardless of what the majority has to say. The first and foremost of which, the reason it is the first of the amendments, is the right to free speech, the right to be able to freely practice your religion, to the right of a free press, all encompassed in the First Amendment. However, it is not even the first protection listed in the Constitution. There is a reason that no matter that there's two houses to the overall Congress. There is the Senate, that it doesn't matter how much population you have, you as a state get two senators. Period. And then there's also the House of Representatives. And they have a shorter term than the senators. And they also are based upon population. It's like here in Virginia, we have more representatives than, say, Maine or Wyoming, where California has more representatives than we do. And that way, the populace of each state is represented evenly, according to the population density. It's like the 6th district is far bigger in territory than, say, the 10th district of Virginia, where the 10th district has far more people than the 6th. So, as a result, Jennifer Wexton and Ben Klein, who represent the 10th and 6th respectively, they both represent the same number of people, but Ben Klein has to cover a lot more territory because the 6th district goes from all the way from Roanoke all the way up to Front Royal. It is a massive district. It would take 3 hours by interstate to drive from one end of the district to another. And it also covers all the way to the West Virginia border, and I forget how far east it goes. It is huge. Absolutely massive. I do know it doesn't go too far past, I don't think it goes too far past Amherst. I know it doesn't cover like Nelson County because that's a Congressman Hurt's district. Jennifer Wexton's far, far smaller. It covers basically Clearbrook, Winchester, and a lot of the territory on I-66 all the way up to basically Fairfax, I think. Now, as a result, each district within Virginia is represented by that one person. Ben Klein represents the interests of the 6th district. Jennifer Wexton is supposed to represent the interests of the 10th. And Bob Good, I was thinking about a longtime congressman. Congressman Hurt used to represent the 5th district, but Bob Good represents the 5th. And there are about 10 others. And so as a result, they each represent that part of Virginia in the House of Representatives. So even then, they don't represent the whole of Virginia unless you happen to be like the congressman from Wyoming, where the population is so sparse that one congressman covers the same territory as the two senators. Yeah, that's a little bit of an exception because they don't quite meet the bare bones minimum for having two districts. Not yet. Yeah, so if you really want to go out there and have no neighbors for as far as the eye can see, Wyoming's a pretty good bet. So is Montana, for that matter. Alaska's pretty good too, except for the fact I personally don't like the cold. So that actually means that both the population majority, the part that would be a democracy, is represented in the House of Representatives, and the ones that don't have the majority in the House are protected in the Senate, where you get two senators regardless of what state it is. Your state, you get two. Period. So there are other rules in a republic that protect the minority at all times. The right to not self incriminate, the Fifth Amendment, the right to legal search and seizure. Basically, you've got to have a warrant to conduct the search or an arrest. And then there's also one that I personally would like to see, and I'll probably do another Ask Why video, the 10th Amendment, which actually guarantees the right of whatever is not listed in the Constitution itself would be reserved for the state, local, or individual to decide upon. Basically, this is the line that the federal government shouldn't cross, and it's crossed it quite a few times over 200 years. So, but it has a list of rules designed to protect that minority, whomever that minority is. And those rules are listed within the United States Constitution. So, after all, the Constitution does, and its corresponding document, the Declaration of Independence, does grant what it was called at the time the pursuit of happiness. Well, that also meant to personal property, to if you wanted to go out and make money, basically the liberty to go do these things. Well, if in a republic the majority votes to take your shirt off and because they don't like it and want to give it to somebody else or something, well, you actually have legal recourse. You can go find an attorney and go argue it in a court of law, and in the meantime, you get to keep your shirt. And because there is legal recourse there, it is written in law. If the judge is honest and fair, and the argument is done well, you get to keep your shirt, and you can say, I never wanted to give it up in the first place. So, eh. So, you get to keep your shirt. And there are other legal recourse available to protect the rights of minorities even when a law is established that is inherently not right. That's part of the reason for the courts. They have to see whether or not the law actually follows the spirit of the Constitution in the case of, say, Supreme Court justices, circuit courts, things of that nature. And the state's attorney general or the federal attorney general has to either represent the case themselves to protect the law, or somebody who actually will represent it on their behalf. The state has to have representation as well as the individual. Basically, the judge has to hear all arguments and then levy a decision. Or in the case of the Supreme Court, the justices. And that is how we ended up with landmark decisions like Brown versus Board of Education that saw the end of segregation within schools. It is because one lawyer argued one side and another lawyer argued the other, and the Supreme Court decided this is how it will be. All right. Now, so as a result, at the time, the minority that is of darker complexions, like Hispanics or black people, were even smaller back then. And yet the system worked to still grant them access to equal education. Because that is the nature of a republic. It protects all people's rights when it's working properly. Problem is, a lot of people don't like the fact when it works properly, at least in my opinion. Because there's a lot of people that are arguing for, say, the actual dissolution of the Electoral College. And what does that mean? Is that in a federal election, specifically the presidency, is that it would be a straight popular vote. Again, two wolves and a sheep voting for what's for dinner. If you didn't vote for the guy who won, well, guess what? You're for dinner. So, the Electoral College does a few things. First, it makes it a lot more difficult to cheat an election. If it was one national popular vote, all you need to do is just have a whole bunch of fraudulent votes thrown around here, there, everywhere. It doesn't matter. You'd never be able to track them all anyway, and then you just stole an election. Now, with that being said, the Electoral College works like this. The representatives and senators just mentioned make up the electoral vote. So Virginia has 13. So that's our 11 congressmen and women and our 2 senators. And they make up our 13. And when we have a presidential election, those 13 are up for grabs. And it's based on Virginia's rule of how to conduct an election. And they have very specific guidelines as to how to follow the election rules. There are some things that are a little open to interpretation and change by state. It's like Georgia has a runoff rule, for example, where if none of the candidates get above 50%, they all got to go back and do it. The top 2 have to go back and do it again. So, when it comes to Virginia, we have a simple popular vote on that, and that decides our electoral college votes. And all of them are subject to whatever the popular vote is. So, say it's Joe Biden and Donald Trump rematch 2024. And the popular vote is in favor of Donald Trump, 56-44. Yeah, that'd be rather interesting now, wouldn't it? Because Virginia hasn't voted for a Republican president in years now. But that being aside, all 13 of those votes would go to the Electoral College for Trump. And the one who has the majority of the Electoral College votes, which means all 50 states have their own individual election. Whoever has the most of those is the president. So that's why we have some states that are solidly considered on one side or another. For example, I haven't seen a Republican even pose a serious challenge on a presidential level in New York ever. That is considered a solidly Democratic state. However, Ohio has been a key swing state. Those of you who remember the 2000 election, Florida ringing any bells? Virginia has been a red state, a battleground state, and is arguably a blue state, although Glenn Youngkin has just put a big hole in that theory. And there are other states that, as the United States moves through time, those wants and wishes of the people who live in those states change. And it's like, for example, West Virginia was solidly Democratic until Barack Obama was up for re-election, and for the first time in my memory, it actually voted for a Republican. And that was a rather interesting change, but I know exactly why, but I'll explain that one in another video. But each state as a whole gets a say, and they each have their own rules that the people of each state actually agree to. And it goes back to one of the things where people don't quite understand why things were the way they were in the 19th century when it was General Lee and General Jackson. They did not see themselves as United States soldiers. They saw themselves as Virginia soldiers back then, because Virginia, if you asked somebody in the 19th century what their country was, they would have said Virginia, Tennessee, Georgia. They would have said Maine, New York, Massachusetts, something like that. Because at the time, the United States was a conglomerate of several independent countries that came together, similar to how we see the European Union today. So, as a result, each state got its say as to who got to represent the whole thing put together. Basically, where they're represented in Brussels now is how they were represented in D.C. back in the day. That's what was being contested when Abraham Lincoln first got on the ballot. So, as a result, it would be, back then it was said, United States are. Sounds a little weird in the 21st century, doesn't it? Not the United States is, even though it is a grammatical error. But that's how it was done. And that's because the overall establishment of the United States was a republic designed to protect the rights of each individual state and each person within each state. Don't let anybody tell you that there's a threat to democracy when they can't even define the difference between a democracy and a republic. And we have never had a true democracy in this country. Not as official government. There's always been rules that have been put in place to protect the minority, period. That is the definition of a republic. And I hope this reaches enough people to raise the question, why do people think we're in a democracy again? So this will be an Explains Why video, and I hope I've made things relatively clear, but as is the case of a republic, things are not always clear. That's why we have lawyers. And that's why we have people to help us interpret the laws. That's why we have judges. And I am no legal expert. But I hope that I managed to at least clarify somewhat what the United States actually is supposed to be. This has been Lovell Hawes. I've actually gotten over 200 views for all my videos so far. I have actually appreciated all this, and I'm going to continue to do these videos, see how far I can go.